Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Four Chicks Chatting. We are so super excited today because we are going to talk about being nice. I could probably use a few lessons. I apparently I'm not the nicest one in the group, but I think I can get a pretty good handle on it. But we have an incredible, amazing author with us today, Fran Houser, who is the author of The Myth of the Nice Girl, best-selling book. Fran, just welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you.
Hello, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Fran, and then we're going to get started. Fran is a longtime media executive, startup investor, and best-selling author of The Myth of the Nice Girl. She's held senior positions at some of the world's largest digital media businesses, including Time Inc.'s People, InStyle, and Entertainment Weekly, as well as AOL and Moviefone. Now an angel investor who largely invests in female founders. Yay! Fran was named one of Business Insider's 30 Women in Venture Capital to watch in 2018. Fran and The Myth of the Nice Girl have been featured on a wider range of outlets, including NBC's Today Show, CNBC, People, New York Post, Fortune, Time, Fast Company, Oprah.com, Elle, and many more. Whew! She
Goodness
writes a
gracious.
regular career advice column for Refinery 29. And as I said, we are super excited to have Nice Girl Fran Houser with us today.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Four Chicks.
Hey, Fran.
Hi.
Hey.
So let's just dive right into it, Fran. Why did you write this book? How did you come to do this?
So I started thinking about this topic back in 2009 when I was at People magazine. And I was doing a lot of mentoring at the time, and I still do. It's one of my favorite things to do in my professional life. And I found that I kept getting asked the same question over and over, which was, how can you be so nice and still be successful? And I was spending a lot of time, talking about this topic and sharing advice. And when I looked around at what books were out there on the topic, the only thing I could find was Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office.
Hmm.
So I thought, this would be like a really good book to write. Like there's definitely white space in the market. And there's a demand for it. And then life got in the way. My kids came along, my job at Time Inc. got bigger. So the book project just kind of went off to the side. And then I came back to it in early 2016 after I wrote a blog post for Forbes called Nice Girls Finish First when they ask the right questions. And it ended up being one of the most popular blog posts in that mentoring moment series. And I started hearing from women all around the country who basically just said to me, if I'm too nice, I'm thought of as a pushover. If I'm too tough, I'm thought of as a bitch. And I don't know how to kind of find a happy medium. And so when I saw that there was so much interest, I decided to kind of jump back in and really focus on it. And I partnered with a great agent, and we ended up pitching the book. Actually, this is interesting. We always say timing is everything. We ended up meeting with 9 publishers the week before the presidential election.
Wow.
2016. I know. And it was, right. You guys go back to that time, right? Everything was, nasty women.
Mm-hmm.
And, when they go low, we go high. And Hillary saying, you have to be good to be great. And so all of this was very much in the ether. And it really allowed the book to go to auction. There were multiple publishers that were interested in it. And we ended up signing with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. But it is, I want to spend a moment on that just in terms of how important timing is. A few of the publishers said to me, if I had pitched this to them even a few years earlier, they would not have been interested in it. So it was definitely the right moment, and I'm so glad I wrote it. I love hearing from women like every single day. Not a day goes by that I don't hear from a woman who's read the book and where it's touched her in some way and impacted her professional life and even her personal life. So it's really been rewarding.
Well, I mean, you're right. The conversation couldn't be more timely, particularly given the tenor of the country right now. And niceness is something that we kind of need to bring back into the conversation. The thing that I really like and find fascinating, and I actually wrote a book called The Woman's Book of Dirty Words, and actually one of the dirty words that I used was nice, but it was used in the sense of being a pushover. And you are very particular about saying that you can speak up. I'm looking at your table of contents, simply says like speak up assertively and nicely. So you can be nice, but be assertive and kind of protect your boundary space at the same time. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's really the central theme of the book, I would say, is that you don't have to choose between being nice and being strong
Mm.
in leadership. And in fact, I believe that the most effective leaders are both. You know, they're nice and they're strong. Because when look, nice can be a dirty word, right? It can be a very emotionally loaded word if you define it as more of, like you said, like you just said, Mary Fran, pushover or passive, weak, people pleaser. Like that's not what I'm talking about. When I think about somebody who's nice at work, I think about someone who's empathetic,
Mm.
who's collaborative, who has the confidence that there are enough opportunities to go around. So it's somebody who really has an abundance mindset. And, just because you win, it doesn't mean that I have to lose. We can support each other. And so, yeah, so I do think it's very important to clarify what I mean by nice. And my writing partner, Jody Lipper, and I spent hours defining nice. Like there's a whole paragraph in the book. I think it's page 10.
Yeah.
but I just summed it up. I just summed it up for you. So
It's
yeah,
a loaded word, and but it's I think like I say it's a four-letter word, but to me it also equates to that other four-letter word, which is kind. And I feel
mhm.
like that's what comes through in your book. You are talking really about kindness as well.
Yes. And, I talk a lot about how, um, as human beings, we tend to want to box people in, and therefore the nice versus bitch, right? Like and all the labels that you
I
see
was,
on the
I was
cover
just
of the
going to
book.
say, we're very good at labeling these days, aren't we? Everybody has one.
We're so good at it. And I'd love to see us move away from that and just acknowledge that, people are multidimensional. We have lots of different dimensions. And when I think about specifically being a leader, or being a business person, um, I think that you can be caring, you can really care about your team, and you can also have high expectations of them. When you're negotiating, I think you can do it in a way that's very empathetic, but also very strategic. So, just sort of like a big part of the book is changing mindset. There are a lot of tips and techniques and scripts, and there's a lot of practical advice. And that was very important to me to make the book really actionable. But really, at its core, it is about changing this mindset.
Do you find that you are the way I'm kind of looking at it is it's kind of giving women permission to do what comes naturally. I mean, quite frankly, I think most of us want to be nice. We want to be kind, but we've been sort of told over the last number of years. And I think it obviously started when women were first sort of competing in the marketplace against men, that you had to be tough, you had to be strong.
Mhm.
And now I think we're coming back to where we can be who we naturally are.
Yes, and I think that's also I think that that is what made the book different from a lot of the other women's leadership books that are out there, because that's exactly what I'm doing is I'm really giving women the permission to be themselves, to not check qualities like kindness at the door when they go to work. I think, a lot of the other books, the other women's leadership books, they're amazing. They're empowering. They're very empowering. But sometimes I feel like they're encouraging women to kind of take on a different persona,
Hmm.
and I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's productive. Like I know, like earlier on in my career, when I tried to take on maybe a little bit of a tougher persona because I was given really bad advice that I should do that, that if I'm too nice, I'm not going to get the corner office. When I did that, it took so much energy because it's not who I am. It was exhausting. It was depleting. And I didn't feel confident because I really believe to feel confident, you have to be yourself. Like you just really have to bring out the best in yourself. And that's when you're going to be confident. If you're trying to be somebody else, it's just not going to work.
Fran, this is Kathy. I so wish that I had this book 20 years ago, maybe even 25. So now I'm really dating myself. But in my earlier career, I spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry, which was the very late 80s, all of the 90s and early 2000s. And it was, as you know, a really male-dominated industry. And I happened to be the team leader of our largest account. But when I would sit in these meetings, I mean, ultimately, I was responsible for $58 million. Yet, if there was a gentleman sitting on either side of me, they would probably get the question, not necessarily me.
Yeah.
And then for future meetings, or even in that same meeting, I just wouldn't speak up because then I thought, you know what, either they don't think I'm valuable, or what I have to say is valuable, or maybe the little woman doesn't really know what she's talking about. So I know in your book you talk about this and women speaking up in meetings. If you want to add to that, that would be great.
It's really heartbreaking. Like, I don't even know like another word to use to describe how I feel about this, because throughout the course of my career, I've sat in a lot of those meetings where women are not speaking up. I'm the team leader. There are men and women in the room. And I know that these women have really important perspectives and things to share. And they're not speaking up. And then on the book tour, which I've been on for the last 9 months, it's been shocking to me that, I've been speaking at universities and at big companies. And when there are men in the room, when there are men in the audience, and it comes time for Q&A, literally hands down every single time the men raise their hands to ask questions, the women don't, and they come up to me one-on-one afterwards to ask me the question. I mean, this literally happened at a business school in New York City, where there were about 100 people in the audience, maybe 20 of them were men. Not one woman raised her hand. And I asked the dean of the business school, is this normal? Like, is this typically what happens? And he said every single time, no matter who's speaking, whether it's a man or a woman,
Wow.
women they're afraid to raise their hand in a group setting. And I think it's really important, and I talk about this a lot in the book. Like, if you're somebody who struggles with this, if you're someone who is nervous to speak up, or you agonize over wording it perfectly, and my advice to you is, especially if it's like in a meeting context, look at the agenda before you go into the meeting and pick one topic on the agenda that you feel comfortable talking about and practice what you are going to say. That way you'll have the confidence when you're in the meeting because you've already rehearsed it. And it's a matter of, you just have to do it. And the more you do it, the more you speak up, the more comfortable that you're going to feel. And the less you're going to have to rely on doing that preparation, but you'll be more comfortable kind of speaking in the moment. So that's one piece of advice that I give. And then the other thing that I say is, if you don't have an issue with speaking up, like, look around the room. And if there's a woman in the room who you consistently see does not speak up, what can you do to help her? Can you give her, like, there was this one woman, Sarah, on my team, that I would just give her a heads up before the meeting. I would say, Sarah, I know you have a really important perspective on XYZ. I'm going to ask you to share it with the group. So I would give her the heads up. Another thing I talk about is having your conversation starters, kind of like those few words that you can use to insert yourself into a conversation. It could be something like, building on that, or following on that, or I like that perspective, and like just something to get you started. that I found to be helpful. And then the other thing that I talk about is sometimes I found that like I share a story of I was at a board meeting and I was the only woman and I was having a really hard time. I was trying to speak, but I wasn't being heard. There was a guy in the room who was just he was on a roll and he wasn't giving me he was on a roll and he was not letting me in. So I stood. I stood up and it forced everybody to look at me and it gave me the floor
You
and I
go,
started
girl.
speaking. So, and that goes back to like taking up space, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes your nonverbal is even more important than the words that you're using.
I think you sometimes you quite literally have to insert yourself in those moments and take advantage of them, but it has to be conscious. It has to be with intent, because I think as women we are more naturally inclined to share and to let other people speak and to do, give other people the floor and all that. But you really have to be conscious of inserting yourself in a situation so you can be heard. Great
Yeah.
tips.
Yes, definitely. And it's always like, look, I still, I speak about this topic, I write about this topic. There are moments where I still struggle with it, where I'm going through that like imposter syndrome, like, why am I even in this room? I don't deserve to be in this room. Why do I have a seat at this table? Like everybody else in here is just amazing. And, and I have to literally like quiet, those thoughts in my head and literally ask myself, like, what's the worst thing that could happen by speaking, from speaking up? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? It might not be perfect. I might be a little bit embarrassed, but whatever. Like you kind of sometimes have to force yourself to do it, even if you're not comfortable with it. But it really does. Like it is the one thing that has really shocked me over the past year is being in these rooms where, it's 2019 and we're still seeing this. Like we're still seeing that women have this fear. So it's something that I really encourage women, especially women that are gregarious and outgoing and confident, and to be supportive of other women who are struggling with this.
I love that. I love that you have encouraging people to go help other people too. It's funny. I didn't realize that this was such a pervasive problem because I was in the education world dominated by women. I mean, let's even back up. I went to an all girls, Catholic high school, and then I was in an education field dominated by women. Even when I moved outside of that, everything I was doing was dominated by women. Now I'm in the rare disease field, dominated by a lot of moms that are just, trying to forge ahead for their kids. And then I end up at a pharmaceutical conference that was, well, that's just a whole post in and of itself of how I ended up at this thing. I end up on really bizarre things. And some women came to me and said that they were experiencing this, and my name came up because they said, Kristen Smedley's not having a problem with this. And I said, first of all, I had to learn, like what you were saying, Fran, about, if you can just find what's the worst thing that can happen, just speak up. I had to get over my fear of not knowing what I was talking about. And I had to really start learning at least one thing that I got really good at in my field and get over the fact that I might look like an idiot when I say something, But I said, I think a lot of times they forget that I'm a girl, that I'm more just this force that has come through, and you're going to listen to me whether you like it or not in a mean way, but I just have a lot of persistence with it. And I guess I grew up a tomboy too. Do they still say tomboy in this day and age? I don't know.
I'm sure we're not allowed. I'm sure it means something else.
There's probably not one speech that last year that I didn't talk about the Super Bowl champion Eagle. You know what I mean? It's like I have a lot of that. There's interest and stuff too. But I think one of the core things is I had to get really good at what I'm doing, and had to really learn so that I had that confidence, like you said, to be able to speak up.
I so agree with that. Once you realize that you really are an expert in something, it does give you that confidence. Like I think back to 15, 20 years ago, I was so afraid of public speaking. I mean, the thought of like getting up on a stage and speaking in front of, I mean, I would literally have panic attacks. Like it was really something that I had to work through. I had to coach. I see Robin waving her hand.
We can all,
Oh
yeah, I
my
think
God.
every one of us can attest to that. Sure.
Right? I mean, so scary. So now the fact that I am a public speaker, like that's actually a part of my job is so crazy to me. Like it is just so crazy. But it comes back to what Kristen said, which is I finally had to just own and recognize that I really am an expert in leadership and business, and I do have a lot to share, and I think I can really make a positive impact on people and on the world. But oh my God, it took so long to get there, and I am still, like we were talking about Kristen's TED Talk, which is just so beautiful and amazing.
Oh, thanks.
People ask me all the time if I'm going to do a TED Talk. I'm terrified of doing a TED Talk.
Oh,
Terrified.
sister, I was too.
It is
I
not.
was
I was
too.
praying.
But it's not in my near future. I will tell you guys that. Like there's something about like being on video that it's really scary. So like we all have these things that, you know, we work through, but I do think a big part of it is, yes, once you are an expert in something, it does really give you the confidence to say, okay, I have a lot of important things that I have to say about this. And then you work with somebody, you work with a voice coach, you know, people who have like the techniques and the tips that they can share with you. And that gives you more confidence. Like anything, you have to work at it. The other thing I want to say is that, Kristen, you mentioned that you went to an all-girls school.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I learned doing this book tour from a lot of moms that have been, you know, coming to hear me speak is that this has been like across the board. Every woman who either attended an all-girls school or who has a daughter who's attending an all-girls school, I hear the same thing consistently. Oh, we have no problem speaking up, or my daughter has no problem speaking up.
Yeah.
I've heard that consistently. And I guess that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it before, right? But I guess that's really an advantage to going to an all-girls school, is that you're all really encouraged to speak up, right? And it's only girls in the room. So I find that a really interesting dynamic.
And you watch girls succeed. It's the same thing for me, in my opinion, the women, girls sports. The girls are, my daughter goes to a public school where it's got boys and girls, but she's on these girls teams where she's a leader, and they're watching, you know, the girls are leaders and some of them are, you know, outscoring what the boys teams are doing. But I just think that as our girls have success and as our boys see them having success, that it changes some perceptions there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Fran, I wanted to ask you, I'm sorry, go ahead, Robin.
I was just going to say, you know, Fran, you mentioned that to feel confident, you have to be yourself. And, you know, a person very quickly learns in the business world, whether you're in corporate or you're an entrepreneur, that you need to know people and you need to know how to build relationships. I'm just curious from your perspective, because it's kind of, you know, Kristen touched on, you know, being from an all-girls school and having that confidence to go out, but also on the flip side of that to, you know, talk in a guy's world about guys' things that they can relate to. So maybe it's football, maybe it's kids' sports, whatever the case may be. But what are some of those things that the key learnings, I guess, that you've gathered over the course of your career regarding networking and effectively communicating through authenticity?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is how important it is to be intentional about networking and to really make it a priority. You know, when I decided to do this, it was probably maybe 10 years ago or so. A mentor of mine was telling me that she takes 2 networking meetings every single day. And to me, that was so overwhelming. Like I couldn't even imagine making the time for that. So I just started with once a week. You know, I just sort of set that as a goal that I was going to spend an hour each week meeting somebody new. And for me, because I was in media and everybody in my network was in media, I decided I really wanted to meet more people in the technology sector and in the nonprofit sector, because those were 2 areas that were really interesting to me. So I literally like went onto LinkedIn and I just like made a list of like, here are people that I'd like to meet. Do I have, you know, mutual connection that could introduce me, like make that warm introduction? And I did that. And I, you know, then I got to the point where I was doing maybe 2 of these a week, 3 of these a week. And because because of that, because I expanded my network, that's really the reason why I was able to move out of media and into startup investing, because I had really built up my network in the technology sector. And I ended up investing, in a lot of these technology founders. So if I hadn't made that a priority, I think it would have been really difficult to make that transition from media to investing. So I always say, like, the most important thing is, like, prioritize it, and be very intentional about it. And then when you do it, like, I like to end every single networking meeting with, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
And is there somebody else that you think I should meet with, who you think, we could kind of help each other? Those are always the two questions I ask at the end of every meeting. The other little thing I'll just say about this is, I had a young woman reach out to me on LinkedIn cold, and she wanted to, she was hoping that we could get together for a coffee. She wanted to pick my brain about my career, but she was really smart. She also had taken the time to review my portfolio of companies, and recognize that there were two companies that could really use some social media help. And she offered to share with me some ideas that she had for these two companies. And I took the meeting, and I thought that was so smart, because, like, most people will reach out and just say, I'd love to pick your brain. I want to hear more about your career. And it sounds so parasitic, right? Like, I want to pick your brain.
Yeah.
Versus this woman was,
awful
right?
expression. Awful.
Yeah, it's awful. It's like the worst. So versus this woman who's like, I've been following you. I love what you're doing. I'd love to, hear more about you. And here's how I can help you. So I think the mutually beneficial part is really important, because everybody's so busy, right? Like,
Yeah.
and especially if someone reaches out too cold, it's really hard to make the time, to make that meeting.
And I think you're right in that all of us have something to offer, some kind of perspective, some kind of a whatever. And there is a bit of a fear, I think, about reaching out to people who are at a much higher or a different level than you. So there's something to be said for that. Recognize that you actually do have something to bring to the game, and being generous with your own time, is something that we can all do that. We can all do that. So I just wanted to talk for a real quick minute. We're actually winding down here, but your angel investor, I love that, first of all, and I love that you're doing things with women. So talk a little bit about what you look for.
Yeah. So I have 20 companies in my portfolio, and 18 of them are female founded, which is something
Yay!
really
Wow.
proud of. I know. And, it's what I look for in terms of the founder and the company is, first off, I really have to connect with the founder, because it is a long-term relationship. The only way that I make money is if the company gets acquired or if it goes public. And that usually takes like 5 to 7 years, right? And by the way, most companies don't have a successful outcome, most startups, right? So is this somebody who I really appreciate spending time with, and I feel better after I leave them? So is it somebody who I want to have a long-term relationship with? On the business side, do I believe that they are building something that's going to have enterprise value? Like, can I clearly see a bigger company wanting to buy this company? Like, that's really important. Like, is there an asset that's being built? Like, I invested in Hello Giggles years ago, which is a lifestyle site for millennial women. And that was a successful exit. And the reason I invested in them was because I knew that a lot of these big media companies were having a hard time reaching millennials, and that they would be a really great acquisition target, right? And that's what happened. So that's a really important thing for me to look at. And then the other thing is timing. It's what we talked about before, just like the book, right? Is now the right time based on what's going on in the world, because you want to make sure that the product or service, that it's not too early, and that it's not too late. So those are, there's a lot that I look at, but those are probably a few of the bigger things.
That's amazing. You're an amazing woman, and we've just been so delighted to have you. And I feel like this conversation could go on for hours and hours and hours, but we have to wind up. So quickly, can you just tell us where we can find you? We want to direct people to The Myth of the Nice Girl because it's an amazing book, and just tell us where we can find you and what you have coming up next.
Awesome. Yes. So my website is franhouser.com, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter. My handle is at Fran_Houser. And you can find information about my book and signing up for my newsletter on my website. And the book is available everywhere. It's on Amazon, it's on Audible, it's in bookstores. So thank you so much for having me. I really loved this conversation.
Fran, this was amazing. We are so delighted, and I
So
hope we
happy.
can have you back at some point to talk more because, like I said, I feel like this conversation could have gone on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
I would
Happily,
love it.
happily on and on and on. So thank you. We are thrilled to have you. We're gonna just promote you all over the place. Not that you need our promotion, but we're just so delighted to have had an opportunity to speak with you, and want to thank you for joining us on Four Chicks Chatting. Everybody else who's out there, could you please hit us up on that social media thing? We are all over the place. Happy to connect with you, and looking forward to hearing you, what you have to say about Fran, about us, about all of this, and catch us on the next time on Four Chicks Chatting. See you later, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Fran.
Thank you,
Bye.
Fran.
Thank you.